Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and thank you for tuning back in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand reader, and today folks we are doing another card combination exercise, but this time I'm doing something a little bit different because I was inspired by someone on the channel, someone in our community who suggested that we need more combinations about relationships. So to approach that, I decided to consciously pull out a number of cards that would represent relationships so we can look at different relationship combinations. And I think this is a very interesting approach of looking at combinations, and I'm happy to change it up, at least for this video. And if you have other suggestions, then as always, I'm happy to take them on. So for relationships, we have the main card of relationships, which is the ring. The ring is very obviously about relationships because it is associated with the engagement ring or the wedding ring, and of course that commitment to a person, to your wife, your husband, traditionally through the ring. The thing about the ring in Lenormand is that it's not just associated with a relationship with a person, but it also represents the idea of commitments, involvements, promises, and also, interestingly enough, the idea of repetition. And that's because the ring is a circle, and so we typically associate the idea of repeating by going through circles and cycles. So it's quite an interesting card, and it's very easy to interpret the symbol of the ring. It really doesn't require any, and not too much imagination, no need for fancy dictionaries. It's like one of those Lenormand cards, and many Lenormand cards are like that, with which you can immediately associate meanings through this everyday symbol. So the ring with any number of cards, any cards pretty much in Lenormand, will bring out the idea of a relationship or a commitment or an involvement of sorts. So I have a few of them here. Let's go through a number of them. The first ones I want to go through are actually the snake and fox. The snake and fox are two of the trickiest cards of the Lenormand deck. I would say the snake more than the fox. They have a lot in common. They suggest deception, someone who is false to your face, something going on behind the scenes, someone who is not entirely honest and even outright dishonest. And it can point to traps and, the negativity that comes with all of this. I would say that the snake is sharper than the fox. The snake is really the more toxic element here. And the fox can also be tricky in that sense, but it doesn't have that mean and spiteful energy of the snake. Of course, each of the cards, and in fact all Lenormand cards, can have a positive aspect. With the snake, the positive aspect is really being aware, alert, very focused on the goal, very calm, and also it's a card of silence, the idea that silence is golden. The fox has qualities of discipline, being really good with routine. It's also really committed to families, interestingly enough. And it's also a card of work. So the fox can be a totally neutral card and just represent the theme of work. Many Lenormand authors see it in this way, and specifically, often enough, it points to the routine kind of work like 9-to-5 jobs, as opposed to entrepreneurship, which would be associated with the fish. Now, the one thing that the two cards, the snake and fox, have in common is the idea of being discreet and diplomatic. Both of them really know how to play it. They don't say too much. They know how to charm the birds off the trees. They're very good at flattery, and all of that. So that they're clever with that. Now, when it comes to relationships, they're both tricky, and they both usually represent a bad sign in relationships, typically. They point to someone who is half-hearted, that's typically with the fox. Someone who is deceptive, someone who is not really into the relationship, someone who could be using you, someone who is self-interested. There's quite a bit of shallowness in here. So it's really not a relationship in a true, authentic way. It is a deceptive relationship. Now, taking the fox specifically, the idea of half-heartedness comes into play, more so than the snake. The snake, like we said, is a bit more toxic. It's also someone who is clever with a relationship. They're focused on outcomes, on goals. They tend to be a bit materialistic in this sense. And depending on more cards and the context of the question, it can point to a relationship that you might have with someone who does some kind of service to you. They can be an agent, an accountant, a bookkeeper, maybe your bank teller, maybe a receptionist, or, someone who helps you with usually this kind of day-to-day work. Like we said, the fox is associated with this 9-to-5 routine kind of work. So they can represent someone who is, who works for you or supports you in these ways. It depends on additional cards and on the context. And the fox can also bring up the context of work, like we said, but again, I would want to have more clarity around the context and additional cards. But in this sense, the fox and ring would suggest living up to your commitments, committing to the job, completing things, being disciplined, and just, keeping on, just working ahead in a steady way. The fox is disciplined and the ring is about repetition. So this aspect can also come out. Now, the snake is more toxic, like we said, much sharper than the fox. The snake in relationships is typically associated with cheating and a love triangle. When there is a third party who is interfering in the relationship, it's usually the snake. When there is someone jealous, envious, someone who wants to bite in these ways, it's usually the snake. The snake is also something going on behind your back, as can be the fox as well, because of that association with cheating and dishonesty. I would say this is definitely a third party, whether they are directly cheating in that sense or not. There usually is a third party when the snake shows up. And there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. There's quite a bit of secrecy, and it is clearly a toxic relationship. Now, the snake and ring can also suggest moving away from someone. That's because the snake is also associated with the idea of letting go and moving on. It's a bit like the road in the sense where, it just goes away. It goes away calmly. And there is this idea of shedding skin. It's not really the symbol of endings. It's more like the coffin in Lenormand, but it still has that association of moving on, usually in the wake of a disappointment, because the snake is also a challenging and negative card in that sense. So when we see the ring and fox, it can point to just staying away from someone. It can be an outright warning against a relationship. It can also suggest that you keep things to yourself and that you don't share and that you watch out from a relationship. These are the positive advice aspects that can come through the snake. The idea of discretion and diplomacy can also come through the fox. I mean, both of these cards are really clever with words and being, well contained and, charmers and smart speakers, and so on. Both of them have these qualities. So these are two of the trickier cards that show up in the context of relationships. Let's look at the people cards. The people cards, if we look at the man and woman, these two are relationship cards. Usually the man and woman are taken to be people. I've never heard of them. I've never heard of a time when the man and woman are not interpreted as either a man or a woman or a person. These two cards literally represent someone in real life. Whereas other cards, like the dog, for example, it can represent a person, but it doesn't have to. It can represent a pet. It can represent a situation of a friendship. But the man and woman don't represent things or situations or events. They represent people. So when either one shows up, whether it's the woman or the man, In a reading, it usually represents a relationship with the person that is represented by either one of these cards. In a grand tableau, the man and woman represent people, and there is this idea of a significator that I've talked about in another video that comes through with the man and woman. So in a grand tableau, the man or the woman represents the person we are reading the tableau for, and the other person card usually represents their significant others. This is how we classically interpret the tableau. When these two cards appear together, it's usually a powerful indication of a relationship, and usually a love relationship. And like you've heard me say many times, including in that significator video, that it doesn't matter who's who or the gender thing, it doesn't matter. It just, we have one woman, one man to represent everyone, and you can decide who represents who. I've talked about this several times before. But when they come together, the point is, the bottom line, the essence, is that it usually represents a strong love connection or a strong potential for one. But of course, there are exceptions to this, depending on the context, what the question is about. And so in this sense, the man and woman can represent any relationship. It can be a relationship with parents, a relationship between parents, a relationship with your boss, maybe a close friend, maybe a sibling. You know, it's flexible. But the man and woman typically represents just people, and I've never come across a Lenormand author who interprets the man and or woman as a thing or an event or a situation as opposed to an actual person. Now, if we have the man and woman with the ring, the idea of a strong bond and a strong relationship, not to say anything about the possibility of marriage, really comes through. If you're asking about love and you get these three cards, it doesn't need to be clearer. You don't need a dictionary of meanings. You don't need to look it up anywhere. It is very clear what the cards are telling you. And in this sense, I don't think the order matters at all. Although when the ring is in the middle, it's just a lot more beautiful to look at. You know, it's just this aesthetically pleasing set of cards here in this triplet. But again, you don't need the ring to bring out the idea of a relationship when it comes to the man and woman. Just these two together represents the strong bond. And if we have either one in a reading, let's say in a portrait, then it focuses you on this person. So again, bringing out the idea of a relationship. Now, what's interesting is when we have the dog. The dog is the card of friendship. And so it represents friends, colleagues, anyone in our peer group. It can represent siblings. In a business context, it might represent customers, partners, you know, someone in our peer group, more or less, you know, someone we're more or less equal to, as opposed to parents, as opposed to managers, which can also come through other cards in Lenormand. The thing about the dog and ring is that it is a specific combination that I inherit from Titania's dictionary. And the dog and ring point to the idea of a romance growing out of a friendship. This is different than if we had the heart and dog. The heart and dog in Titania's dictionary points to the idea of just friends, not lovers, just friends. So I think the distinction is helpful between the heart and dog and the ring and dog, and so that's why I've kept it. But I've also come across quite a few Lenormand authors who see the dog and heart as a love relationship and almost like a lifetime partnership. I personally don't see it this way. For me, the idea of lifetime partnerships might come through better with the lily and the tower with the right ring and person or, you know, heart cards. But I usually need the ring and another long-term type of card like the lily and tower to see that come through. And I like to make the distinction between just friends and a relationship. So that is the distinction between the heart and dog and the dog and ring. Now, if we had the ring and heart, I still feel this is a strong bond because the ring comes through here. So in a sense, the heart is not really about relationships or just relationships. The heart is a generally loving card, but it's also about kindness, gentleness, happiness, these kind of light, heart-related emotions. And so it is not necessarily a card of a bond or a strong connection. And when we see it with connection type of cards, then it adds to the quality of the connection. But again, I like to make the distinction between just friends, where there's a good, happy friendship with the heart, and a deepening connection where we see that there is a deeper relationship that is coming out of the dog. Again, I find this distinction helpful. Let me know if you do too. And so, like I said, when we bring the heart and ring together, the idea of a deeper connection comes through, and there are positive feelings associated with it. Now, if we took any of these two cards, let's say putting the ring aside a little bit and bringing in the heart with the man and woman, let's say. So this can be a very loving relationship. It can be a very loving friendship. It can also be good for colleagues. I think, although I feel the feeling side and the personal side comes through more with the heart, but it's still a possibility. And because of the man and woman both figuring, then the idea of a love bond comes through. Now, if we had the dog, then I feel that the idea of a friendship is suggested here. In a way, the dog trumps a little bit the idea of a love or a romance, and instead it brings out the quality of a friendship. The reason I feel this happens, or at least I see it this way, is because the man and woman are generally very neutral cards. They don't have characteristics of their own. They don't have a personality of their own. They just represent a person. And so the qualities of these people, these persons, is taken from the surrounding cards. So when we have a relationship that is represented by the man and woman, and we have the dog in here, the dog tells us what is the quality of the relationship. What kind of a relationship is that? With the dog, it's a friendship. With the ring, it's probably a love relationship and a commitment. With the heart, it is a loving, kind relationship. It might be a love relationship. It might be another kind of relationship. Do you sort of see where I'm getting with that? Now, let's use the house, for example, while we're looking at the man-woman triplet. The house is the card of home, family. It is a card of intimacy and privacy. And when we see the house with this strong relationship represented by the man and woman, it's very likely that we are looking at these two people starting a family. That is very likely. They can be related, like they could be brother and sister. They can also be parents. The idea of the house in here is that it brings out home, family, whether it's our own family, as in our own kids, or our parents' family, as in our parents and the home we grew out of. That is also possible. Sometimes the house represents work. If you've been following my channel, you know that I often interpret the house as representing the team on the job, our closer group on the job, as opposed to the tower, which is associated with the whole organization. And in this sense, maybe this is representing colleagues or a specific person on the job in our team. That is possible, but I think the primary interpretation would be the first one, the idea of a family and a more intimate kind of relationship. So for the work aspect, I would want more context or additional cards. Now let's use the house in the various combinations here. So with the ring, it is very much a commitment to a home, a commitment to family. It can be marriage. It can also be moving in together, living together, and things like that. But the ring and house can also represent your rent or your mortgage, the idea of commitments to the home. Of course, as it stands, these material aspects don't really come through the ring and house, but if you have the right context, or you're asking about this area of your life, like where you live and things like that, or suppose you get the fish and other practical matters, it can represent the rent. If it had the fox as well, I would say that it brings out the idea of rent and recurring costs, because the fox is associated with practical matters and it can represent people like agents. So it might represent your commitment, your landlord, the idea that you have responsibilities towards this home. That's possible. But in general, as it stands, the ring and house probably points to family relations, an intimate relationship, living with someone, moving in with someone, the idea of possibly marrying as well. The heart and house is not really a relationship combination. I would say it is a happy home life. I feel that it's a bit more general, a little bit more away from a specific relationship, and instead it points to the idea of family in general, a happy home, a happy family, a comfortable situation at home. If we had a relationship card, then again, what we saw with the ring and house comes through. With the heart, it just brings added feelings of happiness. If we have the dog, you could be having some friends at home. Maybe this can bring in some family. It can also point to colleagues on the job where there is happy collaboration and happy times as well. So the dog brings up the idea of friendships and relationships, but the house suggests that these are closer to home, so a more intimate circle of friends, a more like a smaller group maybe, and having some good times with them. So these are all possibilities with the house. Now, we talked a little bit about the fox and house, but when we have something like the snake and house, I would say this definitely brings into the picture a bad actor, I would say. An element of toxicity within a certain group of people, within a certain closer environment. I feel this is like I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but it's like, the Judas element, where you have a group of people and then you have this one person or this one character that is a spy, that is the toxic element, that is really not part of the authentic energy of the group. And I don't mean to make a religious reference if some of you don't like it, but it just came to my mind, and I felt like sharing it just from a completely neutral point of view. I feel it's this idea of someone who is not really genuinely part of this. It can also, again, represent someone who is envious, and certainly offers advice to be aware of this person, to watch out for someone who might be trying to mess up the energy, trying to interfere in a certain environment, in a certain group, just like it would with the ring. Certainly with the snake and house, there are things going on behind the scenes, probably gossip, probably someone who's trying to mess up the good energies here and to mess up the bond. So definitely someone to be aware of. Now, to backtrack a little bit, if we had either of the fox or snake with the man and woman, it gives us the same indications as what we would have read with the snake and ring or the fox and ring. It's very much the same thing, because the man and woman are basically interchangeable with the ring in this triplet. They represent the relationship, but with the snake here, it certainly points to the idea that this is a relationship that is not healthy. Probably one or both people are not invested in this, and it will probably fall through at some point. But the snake can also refer to an illicit affair, right? It can point to the idea of an affair, that these two people are having an affair. And this is where the idea of the snake representing a love triangle, deception, dishonesty comes into play again. If we had the fox, it would be something similar, except the cheating element is not so much captured by the fox as much as it is by the snake. The fox is more like someone who is half-hearted, a bit shallow, materialistic, a bit of a user. The fox is really after its own goals, so it tends to be associated with people who, just want to get things, who are self-interested. They get things done for themselves, even though they're really good with families, but they're really focused on their own thing. So in a relationship, it tends to be a shallow relationship, a not invested relationship, so really not a real relationship, just deceptive on that level. Not as toxic as the snake, but still deceptive. So these are my suggestions for the different relationship kind of combination. These are the cards that I felt bring out most the different possibilities. Let me know how you like them and how you enjoyed this format. In addition to letting me know what other cards you would have read as part of relationship combinations. I'm really looking forward to your feedback across all of these different areas about this video. And until we meet again, until our next video together, thank you so much for watching as always, and take very good care of yourself.